There's no doubt that the major draw of Martin Scorsese's upcoming return to the gangster genre, The Irishman, is the cast involved in the picture. Whilst the likes of Bobby Cannavale and Stephen Graham are fine bonuses, the hype of the film mainly stems from Scorsese working with Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci and Harvey Keitel for the first time in the same film. It will reunite Marty with De Niro and Pesci after 20 years, with Keitel over 30 years, and will mark the first collaboration between him and Pacino. These four actors and director literally represent a dying breed, the creative minds from the Hollywood New Wave, the era during the late 1960s and early 70s where the power of the studios was wavering, and young, ambitious artists took the reins to ambitious projects, giving us some of the best films ever made. Among these were the gritty crime films that often star the likes of the aforementioned four, such as Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Dog Day Afternoon and Raging Bull. Today, many of the filmmakers associated with the era have died, retired or faded into obscurity. Martin Scorsese has soldiered on, however, remaining in the public eye with mainstream pictures like Shutter Island and personal projects like Silence. With his latest film, he has rounded up these four stars, none of whom have had a major hit in recent times, for a film with an incredible story and seemingly limitless budget. Now, fans of Scorsese and these actors have been dreaming of a collaboration between them all. I personally have been eagerly anticipating The Irishman ever since it was first discussed around 10 years ago. One of the reasons is that these kind of movies, big budget gangster flicks, are so far and few today, and the four film stars haven't flexed their acting muscles in a long while. To have De Niro and Pacino in the same film is incredible, full stop. Add in Pesci, garnish it with a bit of Keitel, and have it cooked by Scorsese, and you've got a prospect that is just jaw-dropping. You have to understand that for many people, myself included, this is the clash of the titans that cinema has been calling for since the 70s. For me, it's bigger than Jackie Chan and Jet Li in the same film, bigger than Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef, bigger than Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney, bigger than Batman and Superman facing off in the same movie. This is a lineup you dream about, and it's so exciting that it's finally a reality. It may interest you to know, however, that if the film follows the book it's based on, I Heard You Paint Houses, there will only be one scene featuring all four actors at the same time. Sure, De Niro and Pesci will share a lot of screen time, De Niro and Pacino as well, and Pesci and Keitel, and a few other combinations, but all four together in the same scene? It's only mentioned as happening once in the book. And if that is disappointing for you, just remember that this makes the scene even more special, really. Potentially iconic, like the coffee shop scene in Heat with De Niro and Pacino, or the bathroom scene in Runaway Jury with Hackman and Hoffman, two best friends in real life, but that being the only scene they ever shared together. The scene in the book is set perfectly for the four great actors. It's almost like author Charles Brandt would know who would end up playing the characters in a movie and set the scene accordingly. It's set towards the end of the novel in a restaurant with Keitel, Pesci, Pacino and De Niro in that order sitting side by side across a long table. You can almost imagine a wide shot film by Scorsese featuring these four great actors for the first and only time in the same film. What's also terrific is that this scene is by no means a throwaway or will come off as a self-conscious nostalgia trip. It's one of the most important scenes in the book, a primary precursor for the film's climax. It also takes place during the 70s, the later years in the book, meaning it's unlikely the de-aging CGI will be used in this scene, which is a big plus if the CGI is no good, as it will simply be four titans of cinema doing their thing. To give the proper context to the scene, Pacino is playing former Teamsters Union President Jimmy Hoffa, who has been recently released from prison under the conditions he stays away from union activities for several years until 1980. He plans to appeal this decision and run for re-election anyway. When Hoffa was sent away, he put Frank Fitzsimmons in to take his place as the Teamsters leader, with the intention he would still run things but through Fitzsimmons. Fitzsimmons, however, after securing power for himself, distanced himself from Hoffa and cemented himself in the role of the Teamsters president. The Teamsters had always done business with the mafia, with Hoffa often directly dealing with mob bosses Russell Bufalino, who is played by Pesci, and Angelo Bruno, who is played by Keitel. However, after Hoffa was put away and Fitzsimmons took over, the mob found it easier to squeeze money out of the Teamsters because Fitzsimmons was much weaker than Hoffa. Naturally then, it's in the mob's best interest to keep Hoffa out of the picture, even though they like him, and continue working with Fitzsimmons. Some mobsters like Tony Pro actively hate Hoffa. Pro has a major beef with Hoffa and wants to take over part of his union and is backing Fitzsimmons for the upcoming election. Hoffa, however, is having none of it. Determined to take down Fitzsimmons after his betrayal, he starts to discredit him in public. He starts to say dangerous things like how he'll expose Fitzsimmons' links to the mafia. This turns the head of the mob, and a meeting has been set up by Bufalino, representing the mafia, as an ultimatum to Hoffa. Despite Bufalino being fond of Hoffa, things have started to go out of hand. Frank Sheeran, close friend of both Bufalino and Hoffa, is simply trying to keep the peace between the two parties. Also, it's important to know for this scene that the book heavily implies that the JFK assassination was a mob hit, carried out for Hoffa, who was of course constantly targeted by JFK and his brother Bobby Kennedy. The book, from Sheeran's point of view, describes the meeting as follows. There were about 60 people at Broadway Eddie's that night. The only ones who were at a table eating were Angelo, Russell, Jimmy and me. The rest were at the bar. Trays of food kept coming out of the kitchen for the people at the bar. Jimmy was having spaghetti and meatballs and I was having raviolis. The four of us were sitting in a row. When you wanted to talk, you had to lean out a little bit. Angelo was on the end next to Russell and Jimmy was between Russell and me. Angelo didn't say anything and I didn't say anything the whole time. They knew I was for Hoffa. I had Hoffa stickers all over my Lincoln. There was no prolonged conversation about what they were there for. I would imagine Jimmy knew why he was asked to be there, but I don't know. What do you want to run for? Russell asked. It's my union, Jimmy said. You only have 4 years to wait. You could run in 80. That would make sense. I could run now. I've got the people with me. Jimmy wasn't being fresh, but he was being firm. Russell didn't say anything about the way Jimmy was campaigning and the things Jimmy was going around saying about the alleged mob, but Jimmy had to know that such talk in public would be of concern to Russell. Jimmy knew about Joe Colombo and the publicity he bought and Crazy Joe Gallo. Jimmy knew how all of Russell's problems began with the publicity from Aplechin. At least Jimmy should have been wondering what was causing Russell to go from being behind Jimmy and meeting with Fat Tony to help Jimmy in 1976, and now talking this way about things. What are you running for? Russell asked. You don't need the money. It's not about the money, Jimmy said. I'm not letting Fitz have the union. Russell didn't say anything for a minute. He just ate in silence. People didn't say no to Russell and he usually never had to ask twice. Jimmy said, I'm going to take care of the people who've been fucking with me. Russell turned to Jimmy and was now facing Jimmy and me both. There are people higher up than me that feel you are demonstrating a failure to show appreciation. And then he said so softly that I had to read his lips. For Dallas. Jimmy did not respond to that. Russell turned away and made some small talk with Angelo, and that meant the meeting was over. We finished eating. I sat there thinking that this was it. The people had talked amongst themselves and Russell was now speaking for them, and they were against Jimmy running and Russell was too. Tony Pro had won the battle for their hearts and minds. I had the feeling that it wasn't that Jimmy was running that was costing his support amongst his friends, it was the way he was running. I didn't know how serious it was for Jimmy until Jimmy and I were getting ready to leave. Russell took me aside and said, Some people have a serious problem with your friend. Talk to your friend. Tell him what it is. I'll do my best. You know yourself, Russell. He's tough to talk to. He's got no choice. Jimmy's pretty high up himself, I said. You're dreaming, my friend. If they could take out the president, they could take out the president of the Teamsters. It sounds like a really great scene, really tense and suggestive, and it's obviously aided by the fact that you've got these 4 titans all in the same scene. Now, as I said, this part is from the book. When the movie comes out, it could choose to do things differently. It may even cut out the scene entirely, who knows? But I really do hope they leave it in, as it likely be the only time we get to see De Niro, Pacino, Pesci and Heitel all in the same scene in any movie. Thanks for watching.